Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Monster Report Live. You're joining us live here on Facebook and on YouTube. We're glad you're here because I've got some great guests to bring in here. If you're a fan of Kaiju content creation, this is the channel for you, not just because I'm a Kaiju content creator, but I like to highlight other Kaiju content creators. I'd rather actually work together than separately. I'd rather not be in competition. We are, I guess, technically in competition, but I like to highlight what other Kaiju content creators are doing. So in a minute, we'll be bringing in the Kaiju Kingdom podcast, and I've been recently listening to their shows and just impressed with what they do. And I'm going to leave it to them to describe their podcast. And if you already aren't a subscriber, this is your chance to hear a little about them and then get into subscribing and listening to what they have to offer. But before we get to that, the Monster Report's a show highlighting those entertaining creatures of film history. Your host here, Nick Adam Poling. Yes, that is my real name, Nick Adam. And you're joining us here live. I ask that you would subscribe, like, comment, all those great things. Join us in the chat for this live. And of course, later we put it on so you can listen to it later, because there's all kinds of content that's happening on the Monster Report. Monster trailers, box days, toy reviews, movie reviews, and of course, we do live discussions with fans, content creators, all kinds of people. So glad you're here, and I'm glad to introduce one of my two guests who is with me now, Jessica Tseang. Jessica, how are you doing?
Hi, good. Thank you so much for having us on. And when you were talking about elevating each other, I have a Stronger Together shirt on.
Oh, excellent. Yeah, you were thinking ahead. We are better together. Yeah, better working together because we're elevating what we love.
Yes, that's very true. And there's always a lot of cross audiences, like what you talk about will be different than what others will talk about. And there's just enough for everyone. And it just gives people more choices to listen and to watch what they want. So I like your way.
Well, thank you. And that's the discovery of content creators is sort of, it's kind of mixed because it's kind of hard to find, someone will say, I like to listen to some Godzilla podcasts, or I like to listen to some podcasts that highlight some American monsters, some foreign monsters, some British giant monsters, King Kong and all of that, Gamera. And so how is it that I'll find them? Well, you can do your search, but you might not find some of the real fans. You might find some of the big guys and stuff, but it's like, I want to talk to some real fans, some real people who do this because they love it. And so that's why I like to highlight them, because I want to bring some subscriptions your way and also introduce your audience to myself and my content. And again, better together, stronger together.
Yes, very true. Very true. Thank you for having us on. I know my co-host is Chris Eaton. He should be hopping on soon. Or could be already here. I don't know.
He's in the green room. Chris!
Chris!
Sorry, my apologies. I have two 4-year-old twins that my brother left with me because he had to go run and do something for work. I told him I had a hard out. He just showed up. So we're all, hopefully, not too late. We'll make up for it. We'll run a little longer for you, man.
It's all good, and I'm glad you're here, honestly, because the two voices of the Kaiju Kingdom podcast are the golden voices that I like to hear from, both of you. You come as a pair, and having you on the Monster Report, we were just talking before you got in here about how Kaiju content creators are stronger together, like Jessica was mentioning there. So we like to highlight other content creators because we have a lot of just the fandom, the geek fandom that we have. There's a lot of crosstalk, but I also like to introduce maybe fans of my show to your show because they may not have heard of yours, and vice versa.
Oh yeah. That's the beauty of this. This is with. Oh, hold on. Oh, you still there?
You're still with us.
Okay. Sorry, something just popped up on my screen. I'm just like, wait, what? So, but yes, definitely. I have found that, especially in this world, especially this post podcast world, there's no no one's like, I'm out to there's only there's room for everybody. Because that's the beauty about having the voices that we have. It's 31 flavors. Some people like butter pecan. Some people like chocolate. Some people like peanut butter and chocolate. That's how it all works. But you know what? You get it all from the same place. It's all ice cream at the end.
True.
Absolutely. We got someone in the chat already. Jedi Grand Vel. I think you guys might be familiar.
Walter, I believe.
Right.
Yeah, I'm trying to decide if I need to move my camera more back or maybe it's just my aspect ratio. But it's
all
okay.
good. Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah,
As long
he's
as
another.
you see the important part of my face.
Yeah, he's another YouTuber out there and a great other kaiju
Yeah.
fan that you'll find him at G Fest and a lot of the cons and posting to a lot of the groups out there. We also have Adrian Settle. You'll know him from the Godzilla Train YouTube channel, and hopefully at some point I'll have him on the channel as well. Because again, kaiju content creators, I love talking to them and talking about their story, talking about how they got into this, why they decided that they wanted to be a content creator. Why didn't we just keep it to ourselves? Why is it we like to share these kinds of things? So we'll get to that in a minute. What I would actually kind of like to start with is the two of you obviously are kaiju fans and fans of other IP that's out there, but let's talk about specifically the kaiju upbringing. How did it start? Was it early childhood? Was it later on in young adulthood or adulthood, whatever? And where did it kind of grow from there into where we are now? We'll go ladies first, if you don't mind, Chris.
Okay.
Always.
Okay, thank you. I was like, Chris has had a great story about this too, as well. I am born and raised here in the United States, and I used to watch a lot of Sesame Street when I was young because that's how you absorb education and all the wonderful things Sesame Street and Mr. Rogers and Lamb Chops teaches you. But I also had free reign of the remote control. And I also loved dinosaurs at the time, and I still do now. So children very much love, for some, destruction of their playroom. I don't know, you have nephews and you have children, Nick, and so that's just part of the joy of being a kid. And I saw the original 1950s Godzilla. I saw the original 1954. So with Haruo Nakajima-san. So watching this giant, what I called a chubby upright dinosaur at the time, kind of just stomp through and do mass destruction without a care in the world. He was like one of my big heroes. I wanted to be exactly like him. So to my mother's dismay, that happened in the playroom. So she walked in and there's just stuff everywhere and I'm roaring and stomping and pretending that I was Godzilla and all my massive little toys were parts of Tokyo or other parts of Japan. And I just fell in love with Godzilla and the kaiju fandom just as a whole over time because I was given free reign of the remote control, and that's how I ended up stumbling across a channel that would show it here in the American broadcast. And then that led to Gamera and everything else, which to me was a giant turtle, right? He's just a giant tortoise flying. So he's amazing. And from there kind of increased my love. And over time, when I told my mom what I was watching or my dad what I was watching, they would say, that's actually a Japanese film franchise. He's not a dinosaur to our knowledge. They're not really well versed, but they're telling me what they could gather. And that they would explain to me that it's a film franchise. It's not from America, et cetera, et cetera. And then from there, I learned a lot more. And to be very blessed, I had parents who sparked creativity and the joy because they didn't see harm in it, right? It's not anything that was negative or impact. In fact, it made me very active, a little too active, but they were happy. They were very happy with that. So I actually started when I was 3.
Very young. So think of everyone picture with the sound effect in your head, guys, young Jessica destroying all her toys.
Yeah.
And if that's not sufficient, the 85, 84. So there you go.
Yep.
So,
yeah.
But yeah, so it started at a very young age for you. And so the 54, and I've also found with people and their starting point with Godzilla, especially, that kind of develops a different way. If you grew up with a Heisei era, you grew up with the Showa era, maybe even you started with the Legendary series. We don't know, but it's a case of that kind of does have an effect on the growing up, I guess, of kaiju. Some of them might have even started with the 98 film, God bless their souls. So anyways, but it's like, that's why I'm always interested in finding out where their starting point is like for me, it was the Showa series because that's the VHS tapes we had at the time, 85 being my first one. And then it was like, there's so much more to pick
Me
up
too.
on. Yeah, and before the internet and how I started getting into the research and all that. So Chris, yeah, bounce off of that. Where did it all start?
So for me, like every red-blooded American boy, obsessed with dinosaurs. My dad was, I wouldn't say he was a nerd per se. My dad was into art and he grew up on comic books. So my whole life, I've been surrounded by this world. Like at 3, 4 years old, I already knew who Frank Frazetta and Boris Vallejo were. Like I was immersed in that world. And because dinosaurs, I had dinosaur everything. My dad used to go to swap meets out here in California, pick up those Imperials. Like I already had like a whole run of that stuff. So one of my earliest memories is my dad in our back in like we had like a big den like area in our old house, and he had his art studio in our garage. And one night he's like, my brother and I were just kind of like playing around. And he's like, "Yeah, you guys need to here. We'll put on TV." He flipped through. I believe it was our local KTLA Channel 5. They were playing Godzilla 1985. He just went, "Look, Godzilla, dinosaur. You'll like that." And immediately something blew up in my head. And that just started a lifelong obsession. It did not help that my dad was also like a pusher in many ways because he had two buddies that owned comic book stores. And one buddy dealt with bootlegging tapes and stuff like that. So my dad found out, he's like, "Oh, this kid likes Godzilla." So he went to his buddy and he's like, "Hey, you got any like Godzilla movies or anything?" He's like, hold on." My dad would come back. He had like a stack of tapes. One was like, I think it was Raids Again, and then he had a bunch of Harryhausen tapes because he's like, if he likes that stuff, he'll like this, he'll like that. So that began now, going into like 5, 6 years old of like my obsessive tape hunting now, because this is 88, 89. So no internet. You don't know what's out there. The only thing I know is that what they have for rent at my local video store or what they have to buy. And those Cinema Treasure videos were already out. So my first movie I ever owned was a 4th generation dub of Godzilla vs. Megalon. You can barely hear the dialogue, and the picture was so cloudy that if any normal adult be like, "I'm not buying, like, I spent $10 on this, what a ripoff." For me, I rewound that thing 40, 50 times because that is probably the most Godzilla per minute that you'll ever get out of a movie. So my mom was like, well, he likes it. So every year it was, what's the next one? What's the next one? Because I did know that there was more than at least 5. And that was all taken care of on New Year's Day in 1990 when we had like a gigantic all-day Godzilla marathon out here. And I just remember, I'm like, what is this? And that's where I first found out that there's other Toho movies. That's where I saw War of the Gargantuas for the first time. I'm like, wait, there's more than this? And now I probably spent a good, like, over the lifetime, probably a good 30 grand, 40 grand on just toys, books, all kinds of stuff. It's to the point where it's almost like you're like, do I have a problem? And I'm just like, but I need a new X Plus ride figure though. Like I have to have it for my room, of which it's sitting back there. So that spitballed into that, but that's also, it's because of Godzilla I got into film. Like my passion for film is because I'm watching Japanese movies at 5, 6 years old, and I'm pretty open to anything at that point. So whatever my dad was bringing home, that he's like, well, his buddy said, this is fine. That's where Gamera came in. This is where I'm getting like weird, like I got handed the prophecies of Nostradamus at like 9 years old, and I was like, what is going on with this? But it opened my mind to other things, like because anything that had Godzilla on it inevitably was going to have other Japanese like pop culture things on it. And once I start getting a little older, it's like there's this thing called anime, and there's a thing called Guyver and Giant Robo, and cartoons that aren't meant for kids, that are meant for adults. And I remember my neighbor across the street when he moved in, he had a family, and he and my dad kind of bonded because they were movie buddies. And he was telling me, because I was asking, because at the time there was I was watching there was an anime on, I forgot, it might have been Technoman. But I just remember like he's like, oh, you like this stuff? Here's Robotech. I'm like, what's Robotech? He's like, oh, I watched this as a kid, you'll love it. And then he's like, here, don't tell your dad. Here's Akira. I'm 9 years old. I'm watching Akira. I'm like, I don't know what's going on. But it was the door that opened. And that opened because my dad at 4 years old, this is the man child my father was. At 4 years old, he thought it was a good idea to show me aliens. So I did not get into horror movies for a long time because I have a vivid memory of sitting in the back of our room and watching the Queen like jam Bishop through the chest and then rip him apart, and all this white stuff's flying all over the place, and my mind is broken, and I go running, and my mom loves telling the story. She's like, she wouldn't tell my dad. She's like, what are you doing? It's like, we're watching Aliens. She's like, don't show him that. We don't need him already like traumatized. So yeah, there was a long time, and to cap this story off, years later, my dad comes to live with me for a few months. And I'm living with a buddy. We don't have cable. So I have, at that point, I'm 800 DVD collection because I'm a mad connoisseur of physical media. So he was watching whatever I had in my room, and he went through all the cool stuff. So I'm like Tremors and all the monster movies that he loved. I'm asleep one day, and I wake up on a Saturday morning, and I hear Japanese language, and I kind of turn around like one bloodshot eye, and I see the ending of Tetsuo the Iron Man. If you're not familiar with Tetsuo the Iron Man, it's a very interesting movie, and it's a body horror film, but it's also very experimental. And we're at the end when the two protagonists fight, and they kind of fuse into this one insane machine monster thing, and it gets all like very avant-garde. And I turn around, and I look at my father sitting in the corner, and he's just like, and he looks at me, he's like, what the heck is this? I'm like, you're watching Tetsuo at like 6 a.m.? He's like, son, you used to cry when I tried to get you to see Alien 3. And you have this is 10 times worse. I'm like, well, just be thankful I'm into this stuff. And I never shied away from it. So, but
Yeah.
there we go. That's where that started. My long turnaround story. All thanks to my father.
Well, one thing leads to another, right? You end up liking, you find out Kamen Rider, Ultraman, everything. King Ghidorah is a golden dragon. Of course, I'm going to love him. I see Biollante, and I actually started in comics first. So for me, it just reminds me of something Poison Ivy, Pamela Isley would create. So there's these weird connections that you kind of put together, and it leads to your love of one thing or another. Like you were saying, Nick, it's like the door that opens, and then it spreads to kind of everything else.
That's why when I saw Biollante, I was always thinking Audrey 2 from Little Shop of Horrors. So when I watch Little Shop, I'm not watching a musical. I'm watching a Biollante like offspring, essentially, which is a beautiful kind of creature effect. But, I always kind of go back to that idea, and it's like, oh, you know what? Godzilla versus Biollante, I think they were about even the same 89 time period or so. So
yeah, I think it was 88, and then Biollante. But I remember Biollante because at that point we hadn't got the rest of the Heisei series out here yet. It was only bootleg market. I remember I was like 10 years old. I was staying with my grandparents. My grandfather he went to the store, and there was a video store next door, brand new. We walked in. We're just looking around. It's a little dinky hole in the wall. But I'm just like, okay. And he's like, all right, let's go. And as I'm turning around, walking out, there's the box for Godzilla vs. Biollante with that beautiful Noriyoshi Ohari art. And I'm like, what? Like, I did not know this movie existed. I begged the man. And my grandfather was a gruff man. He was like, he does not roll over easily for any of his grandchildren. I'm just like, can you rent this for me, please? For the love of God, we have all weekend. I need to watch this. And he took mercy. There was one few times he took mercy on me. He's like, fine, open an account. It's the only video he ever rented from that video store. I remember going home, I spent the weekend at their house, and I popped it. I had a room to myself with the VCR. I watched that thing like 6-7 times in a row, just absorbing everything, because I'm like, I'll never know when I get to see this again. Because
it's all and is it, I don't know for you, but is it the movie you learned the term final form before you even
a little bit? Yeah, that's where all that started. That's where I'm like, and that's what I'm trying to think. Yeah, it's like I'm 10 years old. I'm like, where does this fit in with the other? Because I'm already getting magazines. I think I had just started getting G-Fan. So that's where I find out about like Godzilla versus Mothra, and I knew Mechagodzilla was coming up. I'm like, where does this fit in with all that? Like, again, for us before that had to grow up on the internet in pre-internet times, like the wild world of trying to figure out what's out there. I legitimately thought from the age of 4 to 12 years old that there was a movie called Godzilla versus Rodan. And I say this because the clerk for the warehouse video that we were renting from, he was a bit of a nerd too. And so he was helping my mom out trying to, find available movies to buy for me. And he rambled off a list. And I recall 2 that he rambled off. One was Godzilla versus Rodan, and one was Godzilla versus the Abominable Snowman, which I had no idea where he pulled those out of. I don't know what they were from, but for the longest time, I thought those 2 existed. Smash cut years later when Godzilla versus the Wolfman gets found out, I'm like, is there like a weird conspiracy theory here? It's like, did the time vortex rip open and that get like someone like, as my brother jokes, he's like, someone went back in time and put that there to screw with you. That's all that they did.
Yeah,
that's all that they did.
The multiverse of kaiju, which is why we don't have necessarily a canon. Because when people talk about canon, it's like, that's cute, kaiju. Yeah, that's cute.
But that works. That helps so much better.
Yes, that is true.
Canon bogs everything down after a point. That's
true.
I mean, that's the thing that I learned with people with Shin when they were very. Mm-hmm.
Oh, I was just saying,
Shin was people were like, but where does it fit in? It's like it doesn't fit in. It's just think of it. It's like these are all different.
Chris might be freezing up on us. We'll see if he reacquires. We're talking about the VHS days. Adrian comes from the VHS tapes, and he's been learned how to dub VHS tapes real fast. Yeah, and taping from TV, of course, if it were on TV.
It's all one. Oh.
He's back. You were frozen there for a little while, Chris. I'm glad you're back.
Sorry.
It's all good.
Right.
You entered that time.
You caught at the end of that ramble. Yeah.
Let's get into content creation.
So sorry.
Now.
Go ahead.
Okay, content creation. So either one of you can take the lead on this one. What kind of motivated you to getting into content creation? Where did it all begin, and where did it take you from there?
Oh my goodness, Chris and I have. I don't know. We have our point of views. So Chris and I met through the press line. So we did interviews at conventions. So whether it's San Diego Comic-Con, WonderCon, at the time called Kamikaze. So we did press at the time. So my focus was more comic space and pop culture outside of Kaiju and Godzilla. And I always saw Chris in the same press line. And, a theme that you were actually talking about earlier is you're always better working together. And sometimes at a press line, you only have so much room for cameras and equipment. And people can be very selfish with their space. Or sometimes they'll take over your space.
No.
So then they'll put their thing. Or if you don't, you're supposed to research the actors before they come. But sometimes you just can't know everything. We're not an oracle. So sometimes you'll ask a person next to you, like, who is the woman behind that woman? And then a journalist will be like, that's actually so-and-so. But sometimes most people are very reserved with that information because that provides them leverage. They're going to do better than you. Chris and his partner, who did press at the time, was one of the few people that I found who always made sure that he made room for other people's cameras, or that if you dropped something, he would pick it up. Or if you've got to use the restroom because you're waiting on the actors, they'll watch your stuff. If you're not sure of a plot or something you ask, Chris and his partner would answer. So really what drew me was more of the generosity to be able to work together. Because sometimes if your camera light's not working, the opposing outlet next to you is the one who's going to lend you their light. So you want to really try to work together if you can. So Chris and his partner was somebody who was a lot more, George, I believe, was a lot more open with their time and making sure that if you're shorter, you get to stand closer to the front. And if you're taller, it's okay if your camera's in the back. So we tried to make space for each other. And that was something that really drew, because I really believe in character traits and integrity of a person. But then from there, when you're waiting for actors and talents, you'll start talking about yourself and being like, where did you come from? They're like, oh, I drove down from San Francisco to attend this convention or whatever. And then they're like, oh yeah, the weather's hot or something. And over time, you start to talk about things that you love. Clearly, you wouldn't be in the same press room if you didn't like the same pop culture events or shows. And that's when I actually found out Chris actually really loved Kaiju, Pacific Rim, like that was
Pacific
upcoming.
Rim was, I think that was the thing that started the conversation.
Yeah, Godzilla, Gamera, and a few other things. And because I did press mostly on comics, I wanted an outlet where I could be able to talk about monsters and kaijus. And also, growing up, I really was the only person in my grade who ever had that obsessive, deep, passionate interest. So I never really felt alone because I can always talk to my mom about it, and she listens with the love and politeness of a mother. However, I didn't really have people I felt that I could grow a community with to talk about this with. And you shouldn't really do a podcast or even a news site as one person. It's a lot of work, and you are kind of talking to yourself. Mm-hmm. So I felt that so I pitched the idea, was like, would you like to do a Kaiju podcast with me? I think we might be able to work well together. Then we can talk about kaijus and monsters and everything, because I wanted a friend, which sounds so sad, but also someone I felt that you can also work well with. Because just because you like the same things doesn't mean you're going to work well with somebody together. And then I think just right afterwards, I started talking to Chris, and then we met at a volcano.
Yeah. Do you remember exactly how you pitched it?
No.
Okay. So here's the addendum to this story. So we had talked like 2 or 3 times on press lines. We did, I think the first time we truly met was at the Paley Center. We were doing, I want to say it was Dark Knight Returns. I think that's where the first time we really like started talking. And then immediately after that was WonderCon for another like DC event. And that's where it was like, oh yeah, that's really where we got into all the whole, like, you're into monsters and stuff. She went off like a list. She's like, so you like kaiju? I'm like, yeah. I'm like, what else do you like? I'm like, I'm into comic books. Oh, me too. And then I'm like, do you watch like martial arts? I'm like, I love UFC and Price. Like, oh, great. Then she hit me with this last one. What about monster trucks? And she was like, I'm like, sorry, that's the one white trash thing I never got into. And she's just like, all right, 4 out of 5 is fine. So smash cut, like 4 months later, we were at the San Diego Comic-Con. We're in the press line for Justice League Flashpoint. And we were talking to a bunch of the celebrities there. And this is a maxed out like press room, because there's like heavy talent at this press screening. So there is like, the room is just is elbow to elbow. And we wrap up after talking to the Dread Pirate Roberts, and he was like in a weird state of mind too. So all his questions were like, "Yeah, man, isn't that groovy?" It's like, "Okay, you're Aquaman. I know, that's great." It's like, cool. So we had to skedaddle to another one. She turns around as we're walking out, and I just see her jumping like this. She's like, Chris. I'm like, yeah. She's like, you want to do a podcast? I'm like, about what? As I'm walking out the door, Godzilla. Yes. Okay, write me. I give you my card. And then off we went. That's literally how it started. It was that idea, her jumping up and down, trying in a sea of humanity, by the way. Like, this is not like, oh, she's in the room alone. There's like, I just see the top of her head like cresting over other people's heads. And a week later, I call him like, are you sure about this? She's like, yes, definitely. I'm like, okay, cool. And one volcano visit in Burbank later, and then I think within like 4 or 5 weeks, we had it all set up and we were gearing off. That was almost 10 years ago now. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Oof.
And you tend to see the same press people over and over. So it gives you a good sense of who you can trust and who you should not work with or stand next to while interviewing heavy talent.
The press line for that stuff back in that day was a motley crew of people that you're like, you're a professional. You have press credentials, and yet you've rolled into this event in your one size too small Superman shirt where your belly's hanging out with your phone on your little selfie stick, and you're interviewing RoboCop. It's like a little decorum, but I digress. That is neither here nor there.
But
So
what you mentioned earlier, Jessica, is to find someone who's got the generosity, who would work with you rather than against you, not be territorial. So kudos, Chris. Gentlemen, they're hard to come by.
I try.
Yes, absolutely.
I have my little flables and stuff in life, and there are days I'm like, Jessica, like, again, I tell this to everybody, like, Jessica is the sweetest person you'll ever meet in your entire life, and to this day I still don't understand why she chose me. It's like, I'm honored, but I'm like, you have connections, but she's like, no, let's do this. I'm like, well, I'm not. Sometimes the fates upon you, and it's like, if you don't like answer that call, like, you're gonna miss out on things in life. And I'm gonna say this. I've told this story, and I've said it to people close to us, but it's like, without doing the show, there are so many things I would have never gotten to do in my life, and that's all because of Jessica. So it's part of the reason I love doing it. Literally 2 weeks ago, we did our panel at San Diego Comic-Con. She lined up this cool little panel. There's Darnell. I keep saying Daryl. I'm a little dyslexic. Darnell Isom, who works for Legacy Effects. We had Hiroshi Kanatari, who's an artist. And then she managed to get Dory Krause, who is Ultraman from Towards the Future. And he rolled in. Two things real quick. I'll make this quick. Hiroshi is a massive Ultraman fan. I got to the panel before she showed up, and Dory was standing in the hallway. I was like, "Oh, hi, Chris." I was like, "Oh yeah, I remember you." Blah blah. Hiroshi and his translator walk in, and I'm like, "Oh, Jessica will be here." Everyone kind of knows who I am. Everyone knows Jessica. They're like, "You're the guy that hangs out with Jessica, right?" I'm like, "Yes, I'm the guy who runs the goes of the podcast." So, introducing Jessica runs in. She's like, "Oh, thank you. Hi, we're here." So she introduces Hiroshi to Dory, and I'm standing like right there, and she turns around. She's like, "Hi, you two meet. I gotta go handle something." And Dory like, "Hi," and Hiroshi's like, She's like, "He was on Ultraman." She's like, "Ultraman? What?" In his broken, English, she's like, "What Ultraman?" He's like, And Dory went, and he speaks a little Japanese, and he said Ultraman great, and this man is Hiroshi's what, in his late 30s. Like, he's a grown man. His eyes lit up like he was a small child on Christmas Day opening a present. He's like, "Ultraman, great." I'm like, and there's joy. There's such joy. He was like, "Oh my God." And we were standing to the side as Dory's talking, and Hiroshi's like this the entire time, like, oh my God, Ultraman, great. So I go after the panel, and he's having him sign something, and I kind of tap him on the shoulder. He's like, "Oh, no." I'm like, "Don't worry, man. I feel the same. Like, you're hanging out here with Ultraman. Like, there's nothing greater than that." We spent the whole afternoon with Dory. Like, again, I'm walking through Comic-Con with this dude who I watched as a kid, and I obsessed over this show. I love this show. And here's the dude right there. The coolest guy in the world, too. He's like, "I've never been to Comic-Con. You want to show me around?" I'm like, "Of course, Ultraman. I want to show you around." And had the pleasure for like an hour just walking through. Like, I never would have gotten that moment if it wasn't for Jessica. Never in a million years.
Awesome. Another Kaiju content creator out there, Everett, Godzilla fan freaks. You are not too late. You're joining us midstream. We've only gotten a couple of my topic points, but these guys are great conversationalists.
I won't ever. I'm sorry.
You're okay.
Oh, and Helmy. Hi, Helmy. I saw Helmy say hi earlier. He said he's got a great Godzilla room.
Oh my God, I'm jealous of his room.
Oh, awesome. Jedi Grand Walter again. Yeah, God bringing amazing people together. Yes. And heck yes, it's Everett's one I collab with a lot. I like to collab with him, other content creators, and I'm looking forward to where this takes us after this show, because again, highlighting other content creators and hearing these kinds of stories where the door has opened up for them. You just mentioned the opportunity of like you said, meeting Jack Shindo there from Ultraman Towards the Future, which is my Ultraman starting point too. Yeah, with the Australian one. So I always have to talk to people, and it's like, which Ultraman is he again? I was like, the Australian one, the odd one, but it's the one that we probably were getting on Sci-Fi Channel or whatever channel, TNT maybe, that was coming out that I could actually get. And we had toys in AB Toys, Toys R Us, and those toy stores that don't exist anymore.
No.
And so it's like, we were able to take that Ultraman home with us, here in the States. So it's kind of like that to me is so cool. That opportunity to meet up with him, and that's an opportunity. That's a podcast that you're going to have coming up soon that I am looking forward to hearing, because that is I haven't heard much from him, his experience, his being an Ultraman and where it's taken him. But tell me a few more opportunities that this podcast has opened up for you in the 10 years, almost 10 years. I think you're going on to a 10-year anniversary soon.
Yeah. And for me, I will, because I have to say one on behalf of Chris. We have, legendaries TJ Storm. He is Godzilla in terms of the mocap performance. We've also had Ricardo Delgado, who was absolutely amazing. He did a lot of never before seen images of Godzilla films that may not have been made, but also he does so many amazing comics. Kazuki Harada was wonderful to us, and we reached out. We got Yuhei Kitamura, who I feel like brings me such joy to see Chris's face.
that was, again, I pitched, that was the one that she's like, well, what do we do? I'm like, there's like 3 things. We've already marked 2 of them off. Dory was one of them. I'm like, I think we can get him. Ryuhei Kitamura was the guy that he was the director I became like enamored with in high school, because I saw Versus, I got a bootleg copy of it, and that's like, oh my god, this is where film's going now. I can do this. This is the kind of movie I've been wanting to do, and I've been mildly obsessed in the nicest way with the man's career. So when Jessica told me, she's like, we're doing a panel at Kamikaze. This was like 2015. I'm like, oh, cool. Yeah, we got Ryuhei Kitamura coming. I'm like, I'm sorry, what? She's like, yeah, he's gonna come out. I'm like, hold on, I need to sit down. I just like, we went and met the man for a pre-interview thing, and I brought some deep cut movie, because I have I bought everything, and I handed to Kazuki, and he handed it to me, and he's like, they're talking, and Kazuki hands it back to me signed, and he looks at me, he's like, where'd you get this from? I'm like, I got it 10 years ago, off eBay. And he tells me, he's like, Ryuhei doesn't even have a copy of this movie. How in the hell do you have it? I'm like, that's the kind of weirdo obsessive guy that I am. So there was, again, it's that point where you're like, I'm trying not to be too nerdy around this dude, but I have 1,000,005 questions that I want to talk to you about.
Yeah. And luckily, when we did the panel, people were also very kind. I know that his Godzilla film was controversial to many, but he's still part of the canon and the legacy and the lore. So the questions that we got were extremely well-versed, and were people who were actually fans of him.
Yes. Yeah. We'll get Chris back in when he reacquires here.
No problem.
Yeah. He's entered that multiverse again of what he was talking about.
It's no worries. And people get to see the sun just shining through my face. The more intense it gets, the more passionate, I guess, our love of kaiju will be.
I think this is great when I talk to people on the West Coast and I'm here in Indiana. It's already dark outside, and you're still into, getting into your sunset. So that's awesome. And, I've talked to people, on the other side of the world over these things. And so opportunities open up like that, which is awesome, to be able to say, press credentials and being able to say, well, I've got this outlet for guests. I got this outlet to talk about my love of kaiju, but also get other creators, actors, behind the scenes people, other opportunities like you have had the chance to see through the process there. Yeah, Chris froze in that perfect pose. He's so he's enamored with what he was going through. So anyways, but so let's talk about getting back to the podcast. Where would you kind of like to see it kind of go from here, or if there's any maybe plans you've got going forward that you'd be willing to share with us today? Where do you see it kind of going from here? Because you're getting close to that 10-year mark, and you can only go up from here. So what's next for Kaiju Kingdom podcast?
For us, I know Chris has really been instrumental in keeping the channel and the podcast, our social media sites alive. We split our work so evenly. So I do a lot of bringing in the guests, and he does, and the production, he does a lot of the technical things. And because of that, we wanted to expand our YouTube channel. And for him, he puts together, the Kaiju Kingdom coffers, which is not coughing, but coffers as in looking through a box and collection of items. I realized the way I said it, you can't see the way it's spelled. And from there, we're going to try to be able to review and kind of go through toys, items, and collectibles that we may not necessarily have seen other people have gone through or have even looked at. And some are, or could be more commonly found at Target, or things that some people are not able to see that easily. And so we wanted to do a lot of reviews on that. We're also, look at this beautiful glare, almost like a J.J. Abrams situation, where we also we've done a couple of shoots and films at various figure stores, toy figure stores, and anime centered and Kaiju centered stores. And so when that gets edited together, it would actually debut on our channel, because then we'll be able to interview toy designers, people who work in the vinyl industry who do Kaiju related items, or those that are managers or owners of stores that have all of it to sell, but also give more of a retail background on kind of what they're going through, how the pandemic helped or hurt them, but also what they look forward to, or even what they have coming out.
Yes, and with podcasting is a great launching point for content creation.
Yeah.
I kind of started with YouTube just because I was always visual, and so but you branching into that and then getting into, like you said, reviewing figures and all that, the visual medium, because it is a challenge. It's not that it's impossible, but it is a challenge to visually describe over a podcast, over an audio only format, the toys, the textures and all of that. So looking forward to seeing your YouTube presence out there and promoting that as well. Speaking of visuals, we had him for a second. I
don't know if it's something we'll be able to put on YouTube due to the rights and the clearance, but at our San Diego Comic-Con panel, which we are very blessed to have every year, we hope San Diego welcomes us back every year. But Darnell Isom works over at Legacy Effects, and he did a lot of the preliminary designs and drawings, not preliminary, but of Mothra and also Mecha Godzilla. And that's something that you can't describe over a podcast. You can really only be able to see. So while I don't know whether that will ever appear on YouTube because he needs clearance for it, that is something that we hope more in the future, those who are able to come to our panels or be at the same convention we're at, be able to see something like that. So it's not just going to be audio, it'll be visual as well.
Excellent. Yeah, very much looking forward to that. Chris, we got you back. Excellent.
Sorry, this is temporary. I'm on my phone, but something wonky happened with my internet, so I might apologize, man. This feels wildly unprofessional. The whole thing. My deepest apologies.
No worries. Yeah, the multiverse of madness that you're stuck in, so you'll get out of that. But you know what? This always happens when it's live. It never fails. It's happened to me when I've been the host. So don't feel bad one bit. Everyone in the audience is glad you're back too. So I think this is a fantastic conversation, talking about the opportunities things have opened up and where you're kind of going with the podcast, going from here. And it's opened up those opportunities and where you'd like to take it. You're talking about the getting the visual side of things later on, because you've got the podcast. Maybe briefly, real quick, since we're talking about podcasts, where can everyone get a hold of the podcast if they're interested in subscribing?
Oh, Chris is so good at this. Again,
Okay.
as I was saying earlier, he's the one keeping it alive on his end. And I told him about coffers as well.
Yes. Okay, awesome. So right now, if you want to listen to the show, you can go to our website, the Kaiju Kingdom Podcast, where you can stream it there, download it. It's also available on, I've made sure it's pretty much available on every single streaming platform that hosts podcasts right now. So if Stitcher, Google Podcasts, Spotify seems to be the one that people like the most. We're on there. And that's the main place. It seems like no one really downloads their shows anymore, and everyone uses a streaming platform. So, I mean, I still like downloading and holding on to shows because, again, when you start getting deep into like certain episodes, and you learn that archiving over like 200 episodes starts getting a little costly. You got to figure out how to maintain some form of archives for people, and that's why I like to keep downloads alive at least somehow. So I tell everyone, if you can, download the episodes that you like, because I've quietly ran into some issues with our streaming hosts, and they've told me like it's like we can stretch it out a little bit more, but if you guys are going to keep going deeper, we're going to have to start raising the prices on you. So that's where we're getting into YouTube content as well. I'm trying to archive some of the best of episodes. So if you go on there right now, like a couple of our favorites, some of the Ricardo Delgado 2-parter, which is almost like 4 hours long. That gentleman, my God, does he have stories? And that one has been like a mainstay up on our YouTube page. The YouTube page, I've been threatening to get that thing going for a while. Just as I tell everyone, life gets in the way. We got stuff shot. We're gonna get stuff going. But life, life is hectic, and it keeps putting little hurdles here and there because unlike editing a podcast, which I can get done in about a half hour, editing a quality YouTube video takes a little bit longer.
Yeah.
And it's a little more skill. It's a little more skill based, as you should know, Nick.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned the archives and being able to go back in that. I think that's definitely something that people should do. I've actually started listening to your more recent episodes. Really enjoyed the Pacific Rim the Black, and then the one prior to that where you talked a lot of love with for Mr. Takarada, because a kaiju fan. Oh my goodness, we could be kaiju fans, we could be Takarada fans, and both, and he shared that love for us as fans, and it's such a blessing that we had him. When we had him, my oldest daughter, had the chance to meet him when he was at G-Fest a few years back, and it was just a case of, oh my goodness, this man is incredible. I'm just awestruck. But you had the chance to talk a little about his life and beyond just the kaiju stuff, talking about how kind he was, talking about how much of a fan of fans he was, because it wasn't all about him. He wanted to talk to you about you, which was incredible. And so when I got to meet him, we recreated a Nick Adams and Akira Takarada scene where they both got caught and put the hands behind the head, get the thumbs down by the Planet X aliens. So we have in the chat Chris Olia, our good friend from
Hi, Chris.
How's it going, man?
Seismic's in the house, and check out his
again, someone
so
because of the show. This is someone who gives the show that we love Chris. He's an amazing human being. Met him because of the show. So these are the small things that you really once you reflect on it, I've met more people in the last 5 years just doing this show than I have met in the last 15 years of my life. Like there's so many more people that are in my social circle and in my life because of doing this show. Again, doing it, I found 2 friends that I met at the premiere of Final Wars, and when Facebook went away, I lost track of them. And Kyle from the Kaiju Cast did his online convention back in 2020 when we were in mid lockdown, and right after we did our little panel, these two dudes popped up. They're like, "Hey, remember us?" I'm like, "Oh my god, I've been looking for you guys for like the last like 8 years. What have you been doing?" So it was wild. It's small world, but it's like, how else was someone ever going to find us or anything like that? So again, those are the things you don't predict when you start doing this kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you talked about, people who have a kindness about them. It's like we could talk about the nerdy kaiju stuff, but when Chris and I started collabing on things and met at G Fest and all, I remember that was the time where my mother had a stroke. It was really severe, and it was like we were going to collab on another project, and then it was like, okay, let's catch up, Chris. And he was like, hold on, how's your mom? He wanted to know about how the family was doing first. He wanted to put that side of things, to the side. We'll get the chance to talk about that, but let's talk about you, because people who actually have an interest further than just what the entertaining creatures of film history, like we all have, that they actually have a personal connection with you. And that was one. Chris is one of my best friends too. We talk all the time about just life, and I wouldn't have had that kind of connection if it hadn't been for, like you talked about, the show, the fandom, social media, and then meeting in person, of course, at Chicago and G Fest, and then collabing together. And so it just makes it a wonderful thing. And we wouldn't have had that if we hadn't had this kind of this IP, if you will, to bring us together. And of course, we're not just talking about Godzilla in general. We talk about Gamera. We talk about Pulgasari or King Kong or any of these other kaijus that are out there. And that's why naming your show Kaiju Kingdom. Of course, you can talk about Pacific Rim as well, and because it's all in there. And so some of the IP that you do talk about, I know it was in our questions that we talked about earlier, but so talking about Godzilla, obviously, Pacific Rim, other IP that are kaiju related that you guys have touched on in your archives?
We did Gamera, Ultraman, Pulgasari.
Voltron. We've been waiting to Voltron. There was one episode
and Voltron. Yes, Voltron and Ultraman. Excuse me, I almost said Ultron.
I kind of consider super robots to be like adjacent in this genre. Like, like if it's within the stratosphere, like I think we made the decree. I think it's open for discussion. Like, because again, like as much as there is deep in there, there's so much more out there as well. Jessica, take that. I'm going to hop back on my PC, so that way you guys aren't getting any like residual feedback. So, Nick, is that okay?
That's fine. We'll bring you back when you're ready. Okay, so met Walter. I have not had the chance to meet like Walter, for instance, but he's one that met through social media, and I know he's got his YouTube channel. So at some point we'll collab on, and just someone like him, just being a real goof online, but also someone you can talk to about just life, which is awesome. So, and speaking of, there's Chris.
There we go. Oh my God. Sorry again. I feel wildly unprofessional with all this. Nick's been a sweet man. He's been asking us for a few weeks, and we've been busy as heck. And I keep telling him, it's like, well, we'll get it done. And we got everything ready. And now I feel like I'm the one dropping the ball on all this. My apologies, man.
Nah, we're glad you're here. Absolutely glad you're here, because this is what it's all about. And bringing other, and collabing, and, hope that at some point, we'll do another collab in the future.
Mm-hmm.
So, but yeah, these are why, you do the shows and things like this. That's why even on my show, I love having my kids on there, and then they get to see themselves, and then people get to know them and my family through all of this too. So I think that it just makes a beautiful thing, and it makes it bigger than just us, because, we can make a show that's all about us and all of that, but and some content creators get that big. They get so big that it becomes that they almost become celebrities within themselves. And it's like I always said, but I'd like to help someone who's been there where I was when I was a young beginning kaiju content creator with just a handful of subscribers. And it's like, someone else out there is actually trying to struggle to get their audience too, and you know, I want to point people towards them too. So I'm, you know, really looking forward to more collabs like this, and of course the internet has kind of opened that up for us. Things like StreamYard, things like YouTube and podcasting.
Oh, StreamYard, my God, this has been a godsend. Like, Jessica can tell you horror stories of the early days when we were doing this. We were doing, like, again, we only live like 40 miles apart, but you're in Southern California. That 40 miles is almost 2 hours at times during certain days, during certain hours of the day. So,
Skype was our friend then.
Skype was our friend, and Skype was like a 4-year-old throwing a tantrum half the time. Like, I was searching for months for other options. Like, again, like, the only other options at the time were wildly expensive and ineffective. And, you know, when I got introduced to StreamYard through Kyle from Kaiju, he's like, "Oh, dude, you can do all this." I'm like, "But oh my God, this was like a revelation." Like, and he's like, "Yeah, it's like the cheapest thing in the world too." I'm like, "All right, we're moving forward. This is going to be the game changer right here. This is where we will start, like, with, you know, better we can start getting interviews that we've been wanting to get, and a bunch of other fun things that Skype would not allow us because, Skype's garbage. Oh my God. Like, so many episodes we got. I have at least like 8 or 9 recordings that were dropped off halfway because Skype would not just cooperate. Or Jessica would come over and she sounds like Soundwave from Transformers because it was so
Impressive.
just digital, and like, I'm just like, doesn't sound like a petite Asian girl. You sound like you're from the 4th level of a Cybertronian hell, and it's just because it was just so bad. So I say that as my internet keeps, you know, dropping out. So I hopefully, knock on wood, this goes smoothly for the rest of the
It's all good. And like Godzilla Fan Freaks, us content creators have to stick together, stronger together. You guys are awesome. Thank you. Yeah. And what's also cool, you know, through this is those tech questions. Sometimes it's like, yeah, I want to do this, but I don't have maybe the tech skills. And it's like, I'll talk to some people and they may keep that as their best, you know, little secret. They'll keep it kind of in their back pocket, how they do certain things. And I'd rather be like, they're struggling to figure this out. Where do I begin? And I'm like, well, here's what I bought. You know, you can do it this way. You can do that way. Here's a more inexpensive option. Here's if you really want to shine, you know, what kind of gear I bought, what kind of microphones I like to use, lighting. And I've got to learn too, some of these things, you know, I may use in a studio setting, but it doesn't really work in the YouTube setting. So that's why, if you've seen my latest, I'm actually building a studio at my house.
I saw that picture. That's insane. Like, bravo, sir. Bravo.
It's this little room that I've got here temporarily. It's, you know, getting to that point where, you know, building your channel and all of that. And so, you know, content creators can start that way. They can start with an audio podcast, move on to YouTube, move on to whatever. They eventually get to the point where they're scheduling their shows. I'd love to get to that point where I'm scheduling my shows. To me, it's like whenever I could post it, right?
It's that, and that's we've tried that. Like, I'm very, like, there are times I feel like I'm bugging Jessica because Jessica works. Oh. She works a lot. She is one of the busiest people you ever meet, but she's always like, no, well, like, just give me this time. That's why we record late a lot of times. Like, we go deep. So there's time, like, some shows you'll hear me like rambling on, but I'm like sleep deprived because it's like 2 a.m. and I'm like, we're already in this. Like, I want to. Like, I'm enjoying this conversation, but it's like, I got to get up in 4 hours, but it's the only time we have to do it. So, you know, that's it. It is life. It is, you know, you try to put things into like a cage, and we cannot be caged. So I've learned to like roll with it. I've, you know, the big thing I'm trying to do now is to archive shows and stuff like that. So when Jessica is busy with other projects, that way we have something ready to go. And that's why, I said at the beginning of the year, we're going to start moving into YouTube stuff. I'm working on figuring the whole thing out with you. Oh, we lost Jessica.
Yeah, she'll be back. Yeah.
But like, again, like, this is, I come from like my old website that I ran with my buddy George, that she was talking about. We were very podcast based, and we were running this like back in 2009 when you had to pay like good money to like actually put up an audio podcast. So we threw good money in there. Now, it's fly by night. All you need is you need a Yeti mic and pretty much just a place to host it. I am still the biggest fan of long form audio. I don't even listen to the radio anymore, and I barely listen to music. I love conversation. I love listening to people talk. I love that intimacy of when people talk. And to me, like, YouTube version is fine, but when I'm listening to it, like, I'm in the car, or like I'm out, like I'm out driving, or I'm working out or doing something, to where I'm paying attention to the visuals. And a lot of times, barring anything, it's just people talking. It's in there, you're talking. And what we do, as Jessica said, there's stuff that when we do the panel stuff, that's very visual based. I mean, the stuff we did at G-Fest this year and at San Diego were very visually, can't even talk, very visual based. We'll just say that. So I didn't even bother to record it because at that time I'm like, we can't show any of this stuff. And people are going to be sitting there listening to, like, okay, so here's this slide. This is what we did with this Mothra. And it's like, if you're at home, that's going to be lost. And if you saw it on YouTube, that's another thing. But when we can sit around and we can discuss, hey, where did Pacific Rim the Black drop the ball? Oh, this scene right here. And that's something you can go watch the show. And then this is the conversation everyone's having afterwards. I like those. And then when we get guests, the thing I loved, I believe you listened to our to the interview we did with Linda Miller, right?
That's right.
That?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yes. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Stuff like I come in with a few notes, but I've learned over the years of interviewing people, like, just let them talk, let them lead the conversation, and 9 times out of 10, you're going to find so many insane things you never knew about this person or their life or what they did, that it just becomes so much better than anything you could have, like, laid out with your questionnaire. Ricardo Delgado was the big teaching moment on that, because we asked him, it's like, how much time? He's like, well, what, I got nothing to do. Like, what do you want to know? And this is a man who, when I approached him, I'm like, he was at a local Comic-Con, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to go talk, because another Ricardo Delgado who listened to my other show hit me up. I'm like, you're not that Ricardo. He's like, no, I get it all the time. I'm not the dinosaur guy. I am in the industry and I do storyboards, but we're not the same guy.
Wow.
When I approached him, I'm like, would you come on our show? And he's like, why? I'm like, you've had a heck of a career, and you also worked on this Godzilla movie that is legend amongst the fans. He's like, I didn't realize anybody cared about any of that. He's like, I'm like, no, you don't understand. Like, this is a very big deal. Like, this movie was made, and not only that, you are the key visual guy on this thing. He's like, sure. Showed up. He's like, what do you want to talk about? And I'm like, where did you start? And we went 4.5 hours. And he had no problem, to the point where he's like, I can come back on. I'm like, yes. What other stories can you tell us? And again, like, I had notes laid out, all this stuff. I was prepped. I think I asked 4 of the questions on that notepad. I just let him talk. And my God, did he spin stories that were just mesmerizing. I just remember sitting there and like, tell me more about the time you worked with Ron Howard. Like, those little stories, stuff like that. So much better. And that's the thing too. What I love with it, people are like, I want to talk to, like, Brad Pitt. It's like, do you? Or do you want to talk to the person that was, or you want to talk to the writer of one of his movies? Or do you want to talk to the person that was the storyboard artist? Or do you want to talk to, like, a line producer? The people who are there for the background people you never hear from always have the best stories, because they are more the observers, and they are the people that they're kind of like the side characters that you never know, but they have the best stories always. I found the guys who tell the best stories are all the animation writers from the 80s, because they did everything.
Right.
And I'll tell you that before, I'll shut up in a second. Jessica was very kind to a panel I pitched for Kamikaze one year, and it was about dinosaurs and movies. And she's like, I know somebody. I'm like, who? She's like, I know Don Glut. You wanna bring him on? I'm like, yeah. That whole panel got derailed about 10 minutes in when Don Glut said, oh yeah, I worked on Dino Riders. I'm like, I'm sorry, you did what? He's like, yeah, I worked on that show. Like, I was one of the key story guys. I'm like, what else did you work on? He's like, did He-Man, and then it just turned into the. So tell us about when you wrote for Swamp Thing. All this, like the man,
American Ultraman.
Oh, he wrote the first American.
Yeah.
I've been telling her like, we got to get Don back on. We got to get him on because I want to know. Like, I want to know the whole story of all that. But I digress. I give you back because I won't shut up. I've also drank this whole Rockstar, so I'm a little wired right now too.
But then there's definitely, I think we're talking about long form where we don't need visuals, which is where I think we did a SSS Gridman.
Yes.
Where I was just like, there's no visuals needed for this one. We're good. You're going to just hear me talk about it.
And sometimes that is much, and again, that is sometimes prefer. When I was at G Fest, I ran into people that are like, "Oh yeah, listen to the show. I love it." I'm like, "Oh," but again, it's always weird when people come up like, "You listen to the show?" They're like, "Yeah, we do." I'm like, "Oh, cool!" Like because again, there are a few people that we interact with. They're like, "Yeah, but listen." I always feel like they're always just kind of being nice, and they're like, "Yeah, I listen to the show." It's like, but no, they're like, "No, this episode you said this and this you did talk." I'm like, "Oh, wow, you are listening to the show." And a couple of gentlemen, I've blanked on their names, but they're like, "Yeah, no, I love the show and I love the long form talking." They're like, because everyone's going to YouTube now, and it's like I can't watch YouTube when I'm at work, but I can put on a podcast on my phone and play, and that's no problem.
Yeah. For me, it's listening in the car on the way to work or whatever, and listening while doing the dishes or whatever. I like put on a podcast and just listen. I don't have to refer to the visuals, and you kind of find yourself getting more descriptive with how you try to get your listeners to visualize what you're trying to convey to them. So it's a growing process, isn't it?
Yes, it's theater of the mind. I learned that early on. When I was doing a weekly show about just reporting like geek news stuff, and again, like there was a great episode. My buddy and I sat down talking about the who was the guy that created Battlestar Galactica, the original guy, not Brian Moore. He created everything in the 80s. He wasn't not now.
Visual effects guy.
No, the actual guy that created the TV shows. It was him and Stephen J. Cannell in the 80s and 90s making everything. He had passed away. He made Nightman. We went on a diatribe of how ridiculous Nightman was. By the way, he had not watched Nightman in like 15 years, and I was describing to him. We got so many like replies from that episode alone on Twitter, like, "Oh my god!" Like I was busting up because I remember how ridiculous that is. And the way you're making it sound is so much more insane, but it's actually that insane. I'm like, well, that is the key there. And when I listen to podcasts. There's some people who do it. I'm listening to a long form one right now about the rise and fall of Andy Cole News. I think it's called Downloaded. And, the podcaster and me, I'm sitting there. It's what I've been told by filmmakers are like, when you watch certain movies, you're like, why did you do this? Why are you going this direction? I'm listening to this and it's like, because long form, like the long form narrative is what I want, is one of the things I've been telling Jessica, like, I want to move into like every few episodes, not a permanent thing, but like, do long form essays on stuff on some certain aspects of projects and stuff. And I'm listening to this to try to like get some ideas on it. But the problem is that the person doing it does not have the enthusiasm, and he does not have the gallery of words for what he's trying to convey. The people that he's interviewing are much better at it, and so it's an interesting show. But at the same time, when he rambles on, like I'm unfortunately rambling on, I'm sorry. You kind of get lost. You're like, all right, buddy, let's speed it along. I was
going to say theater of the mind is important. Those are all the best scenes of a horror movie. You don't actually see it of what happens off screen, but you hear it or you have someone describe it to you, right? So yeah, I think that's one of the major pros that podcasting has, because you can be grossed out just from a description of something. You don't necessarily have to see it visually, but there are obviously times for visual effects to be seen.
And I'll kind of finish things out with this to be able to give you a chance to plug again the podcast where people can subscribe, and of course your social media outlets. Real quick before we get to that, I just kind of want to know what you guys are looking for. Was not something that was planned. I'm just kind of coming up with it right now. What are you excited about from whether it's monster or kaiju or anything related IP wise coming out for it, whether it's figures, home video releases, something that's going to be broadcasted, something that's coming out in theaters, whatever it is. What are you maybe most excited about that we have to look forward to?
Oh, for me, there are many people who want to be able to see Shin Ultraman. I know that there were a few that were able to go to New York or see it somewhere else. And they were really fortunate and really blessed. I would like to see something more of a wider release because they did that with Shin Godzilla as well. I have friends who were able to see it in various cities. I personally am looking forward to Devil Dinosaur and Moon Girl, which will be coming out because I love the comic series. I love the characters. I'm more of a Devil Dinosaur person, but Moon Girl is also great. However, I am very much looking forward to that. And I know it's controversial to some, but I like where Legendary's Monsterverse might be going, in the future. Whatever, when they can talk about it, because we have friends in the industry who work in it, where it could be in the future. Because I feel like you were saying, Nick, that could be someone's entry point. And the fact that we also, in the US, we lead in special effects and CGI. So the things that we see now, I wouldn't imagine seeing when I was younger. So I do look forward to where they go in the future, because I would just love to see the fandom continue to expand, even though I know it's not necessarily to everyone's liking. But for me, or maybe for others, I look forward to all the news that kind of comes out on something like that. I also really love Kaiju #8, the manga. So it was an Eisner nominated one this year. And so I look forward to seeing the series as it progresses. And it's a very good manga. I really do like it a lot.
Yeah, love seeing the new kaiju content that's coming out, whether it's from Japan or right here in the States. Chris, you've had a minute to think about it very briefly, if dare I say.
Of course, Shin Ultraman. The stuff that I've seen bleed out of there, I've watched that first 3.5 minute opening about 36 times now, and I'm just amazed by just the tone of the movie. The from what the people who have seen it already told me, they're like, it's not Shin Godzilla. There's an utter joy to this film. I'm like, I cannot wait. This has been a fantastic year for films in general. And believe me, if you haven't seen Top Gun, please go see Top Gun, because it is one of those great things. It was one of those things. I am like, Top Gun. Okay. I walked out of there. I'm like, I was rolling a tear. I'm like, I felt like 8 years old walking out of Jurassic Park again.
Nice.
But you know what? I'm actually I'm like Jessica. I love the Legendary stuff. I absolutely love it. I know a lot of people who are just like, meh. I'm like, why? There's no such thing as bad Godzilla. There's flavors of Godzilla, but we live. I tell these to kids all the time. I'm like, be thankful for what you have. My buddy's kid, he's complaining about the Marvel universe, and he's like, it's not as good as it used to be. I'm like, you don't understand. You're 17. When I was 17, this stuff didn't exist. We had maybe, I think X-Men was just coming out.
We had X-Men.
Yeah.
With the all black
that was
leather.
It. For the longest time, we had a horrible Captain America movie, a horrible Punisher movie, and some cool Batman movies. And that was, then one really bad Batman movie. So be thankful. When we got Blade, we were thankful. We were like, right. Please, sir, give us some more. So I am overjoyed that the MonsterVerse is thriving. I am overjoyed at the fact that we're having a Monarch show, that we have whatever this new movie is going to be. God only knows, but I am excited for it. And I loved Godzilla vs. Kong. It's a very simple movie, but it made me feel like a kid again. King Kong vs. Godzilla is my second favorite Godzilla movie. That first trailer, I'm not going to, I told Jessica, I'm a grown man, and I'm feeling wildly emotional. Maybe it's because I'm pushing 40, but this made me feel like a kid again, finding a new movie for the first time and seeing a new version of a fight I've never saw. When Kong throws that haymaker, that brought such joy to me. I'm like, if I can get another 18 hours of that, I will embrace it. The fact that we have a Godzilla an anime for the first time ever, I love it. I love it all. So I'm actually hoping we get a sequel to that. To Singular Point, as wacky and convoluted as it was, I thoroughly enjoyed it. It's very hard for me not to like something. I even like the Netflix movies. So any Godzilla you give me, I'm happy. And the one thing I want some more Gamera in my life. I need some more Gamera.
Need more Gamera.
We need more Gamera. Like this aggression will not stand. I think we need to start demanding more Gamera, because more Gamera is great for everybody.
All right, absolutely. And just real quick, I know we did it a few minutes ago, but where can we find the podcast? How do we subscribe? And all the social sites that you want to plug?
Okay, so podcast. So our main site is thekaijukingdompodcast.com. It is a lot of our content will be on there. Our main the main place you can find us and actually communicate with us is either through our Instagram or our Facebook. I run both. So whenever you see anybody posting, it's normally me. Facebook.com/The Kaiju Kingdom Podcast. And the same thing for Instagram I think it's at The Kaiju Kingdom. I should know this, but I believe it's at The Kaiju Kingdom Podcast. Twitter as well, at The Kaiju Kingdom, because we have only so many letter counts on that. But the Facebook is the main place if you ever want to reach out to us or say hi, or that's where I post most of the stuff from there. And then wherever you get Finder Podcasts, that is where you'll find us. Subscribe, follow us online. Like, the biggest thing you could do is follow us on any of those social media platforms. If you want to help us out, that's the best way to go about it. So, and our YouTube channel is youtube.com/The Kaiju Kingdom Podcast as well.
Yeah. There's a C in there for the channel, right? It's a staple URL.
Yeah, gotcha. Excellent. Thank you so much, Chris and Jessica. You've been more than generous with your time, and I've just always loved that we could talk for hours about kaiju and those, and I'm definitely looking forward to another episode in the future. Maybe we'll just come up with a topic and go with it and get away from content creation, but go into actually a review of some sort and as a collab, because I'm looking forward to this going forward. But yeah, encourage everyone to check out their social sites, listen to the podcast, check out the archives, and continue listening, and obviously comment and subscribe, all of that kind of good stuff, and get them to 1 million subscribers, because that's there's some goals out there. Yeah,
thank you so much, man.
So thank you. Go ahead.
I just want to say thank you again, and guys, Nick has been very generous with he's been very patient with us. So I just want to say thank you again for you talk about patience and virtue. Thank you, because he's been hounding. I don't want to say hounding. That's a bad word. He's been after us for a month, and we've been busy. And I'm just we finally get there, and I feel so bad for dropping out 3 times here. So my apologies, Nick, and I hope everyone had a good time here. So thank you again.
No worries, and thank you both again, and thank you all for listening and watching and checking this out. Like, subscribe, and comment, and all of those great things. Hit that notification bell if you're on YouTube to follow the Monster Report and all things that are coming out, because there's some exciting things coming after I get this place built, and it'll be a lot of fun. So, for me, Nick Adam Poling, this has been a Monster Report live with the Kaiju Kingdom Podcast. Chris and Jessica, stick around for just a few minutes after we go off the air here, so we can say our proper goodbyes. But to you all out there in Facebook and on YouTube, have a great evening, day, whatever it is for you, and stay tuned for more content. Thank you.